Welcome to Built with Purpose. I am Chris Fay, and this is the show where vision meets execution and leadership leaves a legacy. From design studios to innovation hubs and product lines to skylines, we meet the people building more than great companies. They're creating culture, driving impact, and shaping what's next. These are the stories and strategies behind how the world gets built with purpose. All right, everybody, welcome to Built with Purpose. I am your host, Chris Fay. Today with me is Michael Schank. Actually, we were prepping a little bit beforehand and super excited to probably completely disrupt Michael's expectation of what we're going to cover in the podcast today, because Michael is the founder of Insight Twin, an AI-based organization, as well as the author of Digital Transformation Success. And so lots of things going on. So Michael, welcome to the show, my friend. I'm excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris.
As we were prepping and kind of thinking about your background and all the disruption that's going on in the AI space, I mean, I know that's something we're going to get into pretty deeply today. But just as a quick icebreaker, Michael, and I'm hitting you with this on the fly. I see a guitar in the background. Are you a guitarist?
I dabble. I know a few songs, not
okay.
much. It's more of a prop for when I talk to people, because a lot of what I build with Insight Twin, and I'll describe it more, is it's a tool for collecting data about how an organization runs. But I heard this good quote once that, like this is a tool, but it's only useful if you know how to play it. So a fool with a tool is still a fool.
Love it.
You've got to have the technology, but you've got to also have the know-how and the processes and the people that can make it effective.
Awesome.
So it's a little bit of a prop.
Well, I would say my guitar is also a prop that I have at the house. I used to play in high school, and it's interesting. It probably describes, and you would probably be able to peg how my mind works, is that I learned the guitar up to a certain level, and then I just hit a complete ceiling. Like I can, if you showed me how to do something, I can do it. But then when you ask me to like freestyle on the guitar, my head explodes and I stop. So I haven't played in years. And so like 6 months ago, I was like, I'm gonna start playing guitar again. So I get my guitar out of the attic, I get it all tuned up, change the strings out and everything. And I've had it, my fingers start to hurt, and then I just put it down, and it's been down for like 4 months now. So
it's a bucket list item for me. So at some point I'm gonna get proficient enough. Not like I'm not gonna play any bands, but I don't know, if I could sit at a campfire and do 8 songs or something like that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, right. I think I remember I was at my wife's, we had like a family get together for Christmas one time. And part of her uncle and a few of her cousins are like really musically inclined, like just voice, piano, they can pick up anything. And so it was early in our relationship. And so we get to the family holiday, whatever, and they're getting ready to start singing like Christmas carols. And somebody says, well, Chris plays guitar. And they're like, oh, you play guitar. Well, do you want to play with us? And I was like, I don't. No, I don't. But they're like, oh, come on. And I'm the new guy, so I can't say no. So I go back and get the guitar, and we come out. And they're like, all right, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, nope. Well, how about, can you play XYZ? I was like, I can't. Do you have like some chords I can play? And they're like, yeah, try this. I tried one song and I was like, nope, I'm done. Sorry.
Yeah.
the new guy's out. Well, Michael, give us lots of stuff I want to talk to you about, but just in general, like, let's kind of frame out, like, give us the 30,000 foot view, man, like who you are, what you've been doing, and then give us some insights into Insight Twin and what you're up to today.
So a little bit of background. So I've really been my whole career has been in consulting, and specifically in the financial services industry. I started 13 years at Accenture, where I was a deep technologist. I was a Java, C++ programmer, like solution architect, led large system integration projects. Then I went to Bank of America for 2 years, deep technology again. I owned some systems, like the whole development team, production support, etc. But my purview was just, is the code delivered on time? Is it defect free? Is it production stable? Like, I knew nothing about the business. So then I move over to EY, where I spent 10 years. And at that point, they didn't have a deep technology practice. So I had to start kind of getting more into business side stuff. one of the first projects I did was at a large bank, and I think it was one of the end of the year type things. They had $500,000 burning a hole in their pocket. They're like, if we don't spend it this year, then we may not get it in budget for next year. So they're like, just build us a business capability model, which, if you're not familiar with it, is just a model of everything that business is able to do. So we interviewed some people, created this thing that was like 3 levels deep. But it was like a epiphany moment for me. So a guy who is like deep technology and has no clue what the business does, to like all of a sudden see everything on one page. I'm like, this just seems so powerful for bringing people together, for delivering things more efficiently, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of like put my stamp on it at EY. I'm like, this is my thing. I'm going to lead this thing. So did a bunch of projects, started a process excellence practice because I realized that business capability, and I might be getting into the weeds a little bit, doesn't go deep enough, that you need to know like what processes are actually happening on the ground. So just did a bunch of projects with clients, transformation, strategy, risk and compliance, you name it. But every time I applied this framework to it, it made things much more organized, much more straightforward. We hit our deadlines. Everything was typically bright green.
Well, and that's sorry to interrupt you. That's one thing, as you were saying. I'm just curious, like, of all the firms that you were working with from a customer perspective, was like there a common theme? Like when you came in, you were like, okay, let's talk about what you do and how you do it. Or
Yeah.
Was anybody like on their game and had their stuff figured out, or was everybody like, oh my gosh, nobody's really ever asked me? Like, was it a common denominator across these firms when you started implementing this?
Well, yeah, have their stuff together. It's probably good to define it. Like, obviously, people know how the business works, but the problem is it's in like organizational knowledge is in pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everyone's been in an organization where we can't let Joe play the lottery because if Joe leaves, like, who knows what the hell's going to happen, right? So, but it's not. So they don't have it like documented comprehensively and accurately, and that's kind of what I do. Because then if you're driving like say an SAP implementation, well, you got different players within that project. Like you'll have the business who knows what they want. You have technology who needs to know how to configure it. You have testers, you have risk people, etc. And if they don't have a map of the world, then things become very expensive, very long.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussions back and forth where there's misinterpretations, etc. So it's a way to kind of smooth all of that out.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So left EY, then I went to Citibank, and their context there was Citi was in 2020 was hit with a $400 million consent order. So basically, the regulators coming in saying your control environment's a mess, and they specifically pointed to their risk data as being a problem. So they started this massive consent order transformation program to fix it. And a lot of that work is I was inventorying all the processes for the U.S. retail business, and then taking their risk and control data and mapping it on top. And it was very valuable to see where they had gaps, overlaps, where people were like, I have no idea what this risk even is. I don't know who owns this. So it was a way to just clean up their risk data. So I left there to write my book. I'm like, I need to get this out there. And I've been doing consulting with various clients who want to implement this framework. And then most recently, I started late last year, but I'm building a AI digital twin of an organization platform. And essentially what that is AI is trained on publicly available data, but it knows nothing about any specific organization and how it operates. So in order to bridge that, like if you want to truly scale AI, you need that data infrastructure. So AI knows the ins and outs of everything you do. And that's essentially what it is I build that inventory of processes, marry it with some key other operational data. Like every organization has operational data, say your system repository in your ServiceNow CMDB, your risk data in a GRC or risk repository, your org and role data in an HR platform, performance data in various other places. But if you could take that data, migrate it into my platform into libraries. Now you can do the association between what the process is and the data that describes it or the resources that it's using. And then that's all kind of in a structured relational database. And then I have AI on top through an MCP interface. So right now I can do anything that you need to do internally to manage your organization. So if you're doing strategy, I could say, tell me my strengths and weaknesses so that I could identify my next set of projects for the upcoming year so that I'm putting my funding, so my funding's aligned to where my vision is for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think probably I would think a lot of companies, and certainly you're probably working more at the enterprise level, but kind of in the mid-market SMB level, a lot of folks are trying to home grow their own thing. So, I'm an MCP Claude into SharePoint and into Salesforce or into NetSuite, and so it has context of what I'm doing and try and bring all that information together. But it's still a bit homegrown and has to be self-maintained, and if you're missing information and so on and so forth. So I can easily see how that would be a value, especially for a large organization.
Yeah, and I actually talked to a large bank. I have a friend who actually showed me a tool they built there, and it was pretty impressive for what they had. They have this application they built, and there's a drop-down box. You could pick Opus or any other. There's a bunch of LLMs in there. But they had connected to it their risk data, their system data, their Jira, their Confluence. Like they had a bunch of data sources. Okay, I'm impressed. One thing that they're missing though is the semantic layer. So what's the things that tie it together? Because how you describe requirements in your Jira may be completely different from how you describe your risk in your risk platform.
Right.
And how do you know that those are the same thing?
Yep. Is that ontology? Because I met with somebody yesterday. Ontology, yeah. Canonical and ontology. We had a big conversation about that yesterday in a big AI workshop. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's essentially, one of the things I'm going to come back to your book because I have a question about just writing the book, but I do want to just talk about that kind of that build versus buy methodology, because that's something I think a lot of companies are challenged with today. The vibe coding experience. Should I just build my own, layer, or should I do things myself? But first off, going back to the book, I'm curious, just individually, did you always have this in the back of your mind? Were you like, gosh, I really want to write a book, or did it kind of hit you one day? Like, what was that process like? Just in identifying you wanted to write a book, then you wrote it, and then you got it published. Like, just as a human wanting to do that, like, what was that process like?
Like I never was like in my 20s saying I want to be an author. It was more I developed the framework. I deployed it to a lot of clients, a lot of different organizations. It worked. I'm like, holy crap! Like the world needs to know about this.
Yep.
So like when I was at I think EY, I was like I need to do this. So I started kind of outlining the chapters, but I didn't really do anything with it because I was kind of busy. But then when I left City, I was like, all right, I got to make this happen. So I put a lot more time into researching it. And there's a good website, and it's escaping me right now, but it's basically a website that's a resource for authors that tells you through like every step of the publishing process. And basically there's a 3-step process for publishing a nonfiction book. So you create a proposal, which lays out like your table of contents, sample chapters, competitive titles. Like there's a bunch of stuff in there. You send it to an editor to clean it up, and then that editor will send it to an agent. I actually kind of lucked out, so I wrote the proposal, sent it to a bunch of editors, and one of the guys is like, "Hey, I'm a acquiring editor for a publishing house. We want to publish your book." I'm like, "Sweet."
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that was fun. And then, he's like, what's the timeline? I'm like, I've never written a book. I have no idea.
Yeah, why don't you tell me, right? Yeah.
So I said it, and it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because I put a lot of...
fulfilling though. I mean, it's probably more work than you're expecting, but I mean, was it good to kind of see the final product and to get it out there? And
oh yeah, the most exciting point was when I looked on Amazon and saw it, I was like, wow. I'm on Amazon.
I'm on Amazon, baby. Yeah, that's awesome. And so what's like at a high level? What's the core foundation of the book? I mean, digital transformation success. I can hedge on some of it, but
Basically, it's in three parts. One is the first part is just description of, well, the case of why this is needed,
Hmm.
and I always use a stat. Um, so every year, companies spend $3.4 trillion globally trying to transform themselves. Yet 70% of those transformations will fail. So I frame it as it's a big problem that everyone has. So so the first part is the framing of the problem and why this is needed, and then just what is the framework. So I describe kind of the nitty gritty kind of technical aspects of it. Then the middle section is all about how it can be used. So what are the specific use cases?
Got it.
And there's six broad ones, but it's strategy definition, transformation, change management. So how do you automate your SDLC through AI? Operational excellence, looking for waste and inefficiencies, automating through agentic AI, etc. The fifth is IT. How do you design, manage your IT environment so that it's agile, closely aligns with the business? And the last one is risk and compliance.
Hmm. Got
So
it.
how do you know what laws, regs you have to comply with, what op risks, et cetera, and make sure you have that strong control environment,
So what?
all
So what?
using AI.
Like looking back at your experience there. I mean, just thinking about large companies, small companies. So this $1 trillion spend on transformation and 70% fail. Like what's the number one common denominator? Like if you just had to sum it up, where do most companies fail? Where are the 70% normally failing as it relates to transforming their business?
Oh, it's complexity and chaos.
Okay.
and
Okay.
and everyone I talk to, when I talk to crowds that are in this world, like everyone has a story to tell of just something that just went sideways. But basically, it's when you're trying to run something big, you have so many different practitioner types in there. You have business people, and you have technology people, and data people, and risk people, testing people, etc. And they all have to come together and understand kind of what the current state of the world is, like at a broad and a detailed level,
Hmm.
and then come together and say, how do we need to change this in to meet our needs? And if you think about a transformation, like a transformation is a portfolio of projects that's typically multi-year, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Like there's so much coordination that has to happen. But each of those different practitioner types have a different understanding of the organization, have a different perspective, and even have a different language. Like when I was in technology, like the business would use different terms that I didn't really understand. I'm like,
Hmm.
just tell me what I need to build.
Right. Right. Right.
So how do you bring all of that together is a challenge, and a lot of organizations, they either hire outside consultants to help do it, or if they do it themselves, but they don't have like the core skill set in driving large change, and that's what gets them in trouble.
It seems like at least the experience that I've had also is it's always, and I think maybe this is what you said a bit ago. It's more complex. It's going to take more time. It's going to
Hmm.
take more resources, likely more capital,
Yep.
deployed than you probably expect. And I think even if it's a small scale, ERP implementation or full scale transformation of the business, I just to your point, that complexity, all the people in the room, unless you have a really good guide, right, or a consultant that's really helping you and you trust the process, right, to
Yeah.
follow that consultant, it just seems like I know even from our own experience, like we've just always underestimated what's going to
Yeah.
need to happen in
Yeah.
order to successfully get this across the finish line.
Yeah. I've been using a lot this, just to make it real, this example of Zimmer Biomet. They're a medical device manufacturer.
Yep.
They paid Deloitte a total, and there was a bunch of change orders in there, $94 million to implement SAP. So they were taking 9 existing ERP platforms and consolidating it. The go live was such a disaster. They couldn't ship products, they couldn't generate invoices. Basically, the company was shut down. They lost 2 billion in market cap,
Mm.
and now they're suing Deloitte for 172 million in damages. So like that's an extreme, but that happens at many different levels of scale
Yeah.
across organizations all the time.
When you're a company, you can imagine spending $100 million, right, to deploy, and that, now obviously that to deploy and consolidate all this, and then the amount of time and energy and effort that went into that for then it to not be successful, right? It's not like a
Yeah.
6 month rollout. This thing probably took years to deploy, and
Yeah.
you just think about the business disruption. And so it's like, that's one of the things I kind of think about is just, for people out there, anybody that's listening and thinking about transforming their business, is just making sure you are well prepared for the level of effort and that it's going to take, and capital
Yeah.
and time to truly transform. And I think to your point also is probably just making sure you find the right partner.
Yeah.
There's so much noise out there of people that have expertise and can do different things, but ultimately you're hiring somebody to guide you through the process of how to transform your business. And so that you've got major reliance on that partner
Yeah.
to ultimately guide you to success.
And there's risk in that too. And this happens in the SAP or the ERP world all the time. You hire someone like a Deloitte or whoever, and then you realize like just time keeps slipping and they keep asking for more change orders and more money. But you're so stuck into it, and there's such a knowledge gap between what they understand and what you know,
Hmm.
that you can't switch horses. You
Yeah.
just have to say yes to the change orders.
Right. Yeah. Because
Um,
if you say no, then the project stops, and
and then you have to go through your vendor selection process again and really start over.
So all right. So I'm going to pivot you a little bit to think about. I had two questions, but I might reframe my
Yeah,
question for you in, um, like, how does all that change in the future? I think about like AI. My first question for you was
yeah,
kind of like, go back to your Accenture EY days. Like, if you had the AI tool sets at your fingertips that you do today, but back when you were working in these large organizations, like how fundamentally different would it be? And then my second question, kind of diving into that, is like, you know, if you put yourself in the hands of the customer is expecting, like, you want a partner that's going to guide you to success. You don't want to be beholden to their change orders and their
mhm,
hourly pricing and hourly billing. Like, you want them to take some risk. You want them to be leveraging technology and AI to accelerate implementation and deploy best practices. So, maybe the first thing, just kind of a general reflection,
yeah.
like, what would your world have looked like had you have had the AI tool sets that are available today?
Oh, things would go so much faster.
Yeah.
um, but I think there's still a lot of room to grow, and that's why I built Insight Twin. But the just even like a vibe coding, like I would have to hand code everything that I did, and now it's a state where you could have Claude Code or whatever agent you're using create the code, but you have to still be on top of it and make sure that what they're doing is right,
Hmm.
because I think humans have to be accountable. But where I think so things will go faster, but I think where things could really take a leap, and this is kind of the Insight Twin story is you still need that data infrastructure because AI, as I mentioned before, is trained on publicly available data and doesn't know, like in the Zimmer Biomet instance, doesn't know about the 9 ERPs, what those specifically do, where they're deployed, what people use them, etc. So if you give it that data infrastructure, now AI could really run the entire program.
Hmm.
So this is something it's on my roadmap, but like the entire SDLC could be in a long running workflow, and then you could have specific agents that do things like generate my scope, create
Yep.
my requirements, do my design, do my test plans, do my people change management plans, all within a workflow that gives you status kind of automatically. But then you do have, I'm a big believer in this, you need human in the loop control.
Yep.
Just
Right.
because it could create a scope document doesn't mean anything until there's a human accountable that has to sign off on that and say, yes, I agree with this. Then now that could be used for the basis for everything else that it's dependent on. So,
So do you think, I mean, just philosophically, because this is something I talked to a lot of our guests about, and I spent a lot of
yeah,
time, researching and trying to understand this. I mean, when you think about Accenture, you think about EY, just, we've got a consulting organization in our business, you do consulting as well. Like,
yeah,
is there a massive disruption and reduction in workforce, right?
yeah.
Now, there might be short-term disruption, but like long-term, is there a massive disruption to attorneys, to consultants, to these labor-based models because AI is able to augment? Or does it do what technology has done in the past to us? And over time, it just enables us to solve more problems faster. And we actually might be able to grow that industry because now we're able to do things at a rapid rate.
I think both are potentially true. On the first part of the disruption, the way consulting works, it's every engagement's a pyramid. So you have the senior or the partner on top, senior managers, and then you have the bottom of the pyramid is the analysts, and they say they're 2 to 4 years out of college or whatever. That's where you make the margin because their salary is low enough where if you say double the bill rate, then you're getting a lot of margin. But what traditionally what that bottom layer has been doing has been kind of the grunt work. Like they create spreadsheets, they create decks, et cetera, et cetera. But now with like Claude Cowork and some of these other tools, like I Claude does my decks. It can
Right.
create spreadsheets for me. So is that layer needed? So if you start picking off like those more junior people, now the entire kind of margin model like breaks apart. So I think that's where and I think a lot of customers are like, why am I paying, $110 an hour for this kid 2 years out of college when I could just have my people do it?
Yeah.
So I think that's a root of, and it's been documented. Like I think the people most at risk are the younger kids that just don't have the experience, don't have the knowledge yet. So I think that's disrupting a lot of it. I think there's prior to the show we were talking about, but can you take some of that greater knowledge and kind of force it down the pyramid? I think that's happening. Like I read an article that the CEO of McKinsey said they have 60,000 employees and 25,000 of are AI. And if you think about it, McKinsey, they have a lot of frameworks. They have a lot of assets that they deploy to clients. And I'm sure, and I don't know this intimately, that they've taken all that knowledge and put it in kind of one data set that AI has access to.
Mm-hmm.
And if that bottom of the pyramid now has access to that knowledge through AI and can provide a higher level service, then that's probably the future for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of like in our warm up there, we were talking about that. And you kind of philosophically think about it like, okay, if AI takes the low grunt work tasks and wipes out kind of that entry level job, to say, then what happens in 10 years? How do entry level people become more senior level people if some of those tasks have been put away? But then by the same token, so then you have kind of a very top heavy organization, top heavy, expensive, experienced individuals with kind of that bottom layer of AI. But then you could also think about it completely in reverse. Is you could also use AI to be the knowledge, the experience, the best practices, and you might actually be able to leverage, empower a more junior level resource with a more experienced AI agent. So it'll be, and we're talking about this in our practice as we think about how we continue to grow and how we service customers. Is you immediately go to, okay, well, the button pushing, the data consolidation, that's now being done by AI. What's going to happen to these junior level resources? But then you're like, well, wait a second, what if I document all the industry best practices and context that I know, and then enable those people to maybe step up and perform at a higher level? So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see how the staffing model shifts. And I think, fundamentally, if you kind of follow what history has told us, is that this should be able to accelerate our ability to solve problems, but there's definitely going to be some impact on the labor pool. I mean, I'm talking to kids coming out of college and in marketing and entry level business and stuff, and they're struggling to find jobs. Because I think every business is trying to figure out what this ecosystem is going to look like. And so I talked to an attorney that has I don't know. I want to say they're like 1,000 attorney, 2,000 attorney, big company. And, they said they're reducing by between 10 to 20% their annual entry level attorney hiring, and you just generally think if that is long-term based or short-term based, I mean, that's a massive disruption to a lot of these kids coming out of college.
That's a real risk. I have an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. So, I worry about them for that. The advice I'd give them is just learn how to work with AI. Because it's more than just prompting it for like, hey, help me write this email. but like really understand how to work with data, how to um, set up your structure so that you can really leverage it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's a real risk. Is like what happens 10 years from now when those senior people retire or move on, and then there's not that next layer that knows.
Yep.
But I think you're hitting on an important point. It's like it's all about data. Like even that knowledge, like getting all that knowledge together requires a structure so that it makes coherent sense as a whole. But then you could dive into specifics,
Yep.
and that's kind of what we're doing with Insight Twin.
Yeah.
Is a lot of these senior people like in a consulting engagement, like you got a guy who like really knows payments or really knows finance or whatever. But if you could document the finance environment, then those junior or the payments environment, then those junior people could know just as much as they do.
Right. Yeah, and it brings up a great point. I can kind of maybe a pivot into Insight Twin is, the AI is as good as the context that you give it, like the
Yep.
information that it has access to. And I think as humans, we start seeing, oh my gosh, look what Claude or Gemini or OpenAI, like
Yep.
look what it can do for me. Look how fast it's working. It must be right. It must know everything. I'm going to place all of my trust and faith into this tool set, and I'm gonna, it's gonna guide my entire life and my entire business. And like I'm seeing like my kids, I mean, I got 15, 17-year-old. I mean, they're placing a lot of faith, in it. I have friends diagnosing their own, whatever's based upon what Claude says. And I
Yep.
think like as a society, we're putting so much individual weight on what AI tells us. And even though it's a great guide for us, and but it's not always as accurate as we all want it to be or think it's going to be. And so you think about that
100%.
probably in business context is like we have a lot of proprietary stuff inside of our company. We do things a little differently from time to time, and so it has to have that underlying context. And so if you're implementing AI in your business, and this is where I'm curious to kind of learn more about Insight Twin, but if I'm just using Claude and it doesn't have context or knowledge of our ERP or our Salesforce instance, or how we do things or why we do things or what our employees look like or skill sets and others, it's just giving me the same advice it would give any organization. And so that's probably, I
Yep.
think, where I'm kind of seeing where you're going probably with Insight Twin is, yeah, use the public data. That's great. But
Yeah.
what's more important is to ground it in your own data, your own
Yep.
processes, how you run the organization.
That's right. And it's so Insight Twin is like a SaaS platform. Obviously,
Mhm.
it's technology, but I think a bigger part of it, and it goes to like the a fool with a tool is still a fool, is you and this. I think this is an opportunity for the consulting firms too. Is the data just doesn't appear. It takes a concerted effort to think about how am I going to structure this data? How am I going to collect it from the various sources? How am I going to get the right people that need to say that what I assembled is correct, is accurate? You need governance on it because that data will continue to change. So you need processes to say, how do I revalidate what I have on a periodic basis, or as the data change, where I have hooks that say, update the data. But that's a bigger part of it. So Insight Twin is a technology, but it's also a playbook
Mm.
of like what is it you need to do to make sure that you could trust this context data, so that it's giving you those more accurate responses. It's also, I think the accountability model needs to shift in some of these organizations too, where a lot of the doer tasks are especially at the junior level are gonna go away. But I think it turns more into like an ownership model where you break down the org into specific areas of ownership. And then
Mhm.
those areas of ownership have to be responsible for making sure that the data that's captured in that context repository is accurate. And that when you generate new knowledge based on that data, that they're the ones signing off on it, that's accurate.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because we're going through a process right now, where you've got these various people, right, that report to different leaders, right,
Yep.
but they have common responsibility of certain either processes or kind of pods or center of excellences. So like
Yep.
for us, like integration is one. So we got developers on one side that know integration. You've got kind of the marketing business owner on another. You've got the consulting product. I mean, you have all these various skill sets that are across the organization, and they all report up to different individuals, but they're all accountable to that
Yeah.
one kind of pod. And so what we just what we've done like in the past 2 weeks is to really formally establish. And I'd be curious for your advice on this because you've obviously dealt with much
Yeah.
larger organizations than we are. But is when you said ownership, I immediately that brought me back to what we're doing. Is we can have this cross-functional aspect of what we're doing, but who owns it? And then who
Yep.
owns that center of excellence? Who is responsible for making sure that that connected process works? And
Yep.
then how do we then begin to build context and best practices and get the thoughts from this person or this team into this person's hands and eventually just
Yep.
establish what would be a common framework for deployment. It seems like
Yeah.
that's kind of what you're a bit what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm doing. So what my model is I follow the org hierarchy. So you have a center integration center of excellence. Well, that reports to a leader, and what my process right now it's because the challenge is a lot of this knowledge is in people's heads, so you have to talk to them. So it's
Mm-hmm.
an interview process, and I start at the top of the hierarchy and say, describe what your organization does. But if I went to the leader of the COE for the integration, it'd be like document integration requirements or test integration, build integrations, whatever those processes are. But then I keep walking down that hierarchy until I get all the processes, and then I go back up the hierarchy and have people give me formal approval that what I captured is accurate and complete because I want that on record. So no, if someone says, "Well, this is wrong," I'm like, "Well, you told me the data of what you do." Um, but yeah, uh, then once you have that, oh, the other thing I wanted to say is that's kind of at a organizational level,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's kind of a cross organizational process as well. So the center of excellence is obviously one part of developing or delivering change. There's probably business creating requirements in another org. There's maybe a testing team in another org, etc. You want to create something like a value stream that connects those individual organization processes together so you can see where all the handoffs are. And you could have an owner for that. So who is responsible for our change process? And then they have to do the coordination with all the different bits. But now they're armed with specific details of what those processes are, who owns them, and maybe some details about how they work.
Yeah, interesting. And then how? So we kind of played around with this topic earlier. So, kind of in this build versus buy methodology is maybe
Yep.
something I want to kind of dive into. So you built a platform.
Yep.
It's probably purpose built for the industries and the types of organizations that you work with, and you start deploying best practices that you're learning across other areas.
Yep.
But you mentioned earlier, like there's companies out there that are just funding their own vibe coded solution to connect these dots and
Yep.
it's a conversation we have a lot with customers around this kind of build versus buy methodology,
Yep.
and you've always had the ability to build your own technology. Now you can just do it a lot faster, and a lot less
Yep.
expensively because of AI. But the root reason why you typically don't build your own technology is you're gonna have to maintain it. It's only proprietary to what you do. There's no peer learning, industry best practices. You've got to keep the integrity, the updates, the data security. And so I think, in the past when a lot of companies looked at this build versus buy, it wasn't that it was going to be so expensive to build. It's just that they don't have to maintain it and manage it
Yeah.
and keep the upgrades. And I think a lot of companies, I'm thinking probably for customers of yours, they're not hiring you to just repeat what they already do today. They're hiring
Yep.
you because you probably have insights and best practices that you can bring to deploy to their business to ultimately help. And so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are just on this like build versus buy methodology in the new age of AI.
It gets into I'm sure you heard the term SaaS apocalypse.
Oh yeah,
Um,
we
yeah,
talk about it all the time.
yeah, I think the distinction is like if you're a SaaS company, can you be vibe coded away, or are you infrastructure for AI? And a lot of these companies are, at risk because, you know, I I started playing around with a free instance of HubSpot, and I tried to do something very simple, and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out if it's the licensing level or whatever, but I didn't do it. But I was like, I should just create my own because I know what I want. This is easy.
Yep.
So like companies like that are at risk, whereas Insight Twin I think is you know it is building the infrastructure that AI sits on. And there's a whole process around collecting knowledge and organizing that. So I think it's a little bit safer from that perspective. Not immune, but a little bit safer. But yeah, I think that's a real thing. I think a lot of companies now have to make a decision like, do I buy this or do I build it? And when you say the support costs, yeah, they don't want to do it. But if the per seat licensing model is such that it's cheaper to even build, stand up your own support organization, then maybe that's the route you go down.
Yeah. But it's interesting you say that, and just you start thinking about it. Obviously, we're in the SaaS space, and you start thinking about, where are we at risk, and what value are we adding to the customer base, and how are we innovating at a faster pace that might be able to outpace what a customer could vibe code themselves, right? Because certainly, if we're static and not innovating at a fast pace, a customer could very easily, with enough money, vibe code some level of connected solution. So it's been an interesting self reflection for us to say, are we moving fast enough? Are we solving problems? Are we making our customers better at a faster pace than they can do themselves? And then I love what you said is, are we connecting? Are we connecting the dots? Can everything that we do ultimately begin to provide deeper context for AI and workflows and agents? But yeah, I think about a lot of tool sets that are out there, and I know a lot of people in the space, and companies that started in the past handful of years, maybe a couple $1 million or so in ARR or higher, and
Yeah.
that are seriously at risk, and so are the big folks. I mean, the big.
Well, and there's another angle to it too, is the per seat license model.
Mhm.
Um, like, what if the user is not a human? Like, can you still charge that per seat license model? Like, there's a lot of things that the whole industry, SaaS industry, needs to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole, there's a lot of conversation around consumption modeling, and then obviously outcome-based modeling, and
Yeah.
ultimately creating employees that you charge out. A SaaS company like us would create employees that we could charge out like we would a traditional labor pool, but it's
Yeah.
skilled and trained in certain workflows. And yeah, it's I've never, I'm 45, and I've been in the space for 20 something years, and but still, it's just the pace of change is and the noise and the FUD and the experimentation is just like, it's so exciting, but it is just
Yeah.
so scary as well, and you're just waiting for somebody to announce something major every day, and what's going to happen here, and how are we going to do this. And I think the thing that we keep telling ourselves is, we have to pay attention to the market. We have to understand what's
Yeah.
going on, but you have to be careful about allowing all the noise to derail your efforts or fragment your efforts.
Oh
There's
yeah.
kind of
You
some
got to stay
balance,
focused. You
right?
got to stay focused on your vision and mission. What are we
Yeah,
doing? And think of this thing as it's an enabler, but you need to be smart about how you leverage it.
yeah.
I don't know if you saw that there was an article that Microsoft like deployed Claude Code to all their developers, and then they looked at their token costs, and they started like pulling a lot of them. They're like, "Wow,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
guys are killing us."
yeah. Oh, it's amazing. I mean, you put it in people's hands, and I mean, we do it in our organization too. You want to give people the tool sets, but then you're like, holy cow, like this thing
Yeah,
starts really running up. And if you keep your labor model the same, and you also put productivity tools on place, you got to really watch it. But I think we're at a stage of still, it's becoming a little bit more mainstream, but it's still just rapid experimentation. I mean, there's people that
yeah,
are at different levels of technology adoption, and we've got people in our company that are just still trying to figure out where it fits. We have people in our company that are high level power users doing amazing things. And the challenge that we have for our company, and I would just say for anybody that we talk to, listeners or whatever, is you just got to get started. You got to get your head in the game. And just to your
yeah,
18-year-old and 22-year-old, like, look, be enabled, learn, get trained, get skilled, play, practice, do that,
yeah,
because that will increase your chances
Yeah.
of success. And you know what? If AI wipes us all out and we're just run by robots and computers, and we all got to just live on the farm, then we got bigger problems, right? So
But there's another stat out there. MIT has a report that says that 95% of AI initiatives show no return.
hmm,
And I think they're really specifically talking about agentic AI workflows. So while there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of like movement. I think the problem with like an agentic workflow is it looks great in a pilot, it wows people, but then they hit a wall before they move it in production.
hmm.
And that's because they just haven't solved or really thought through what's the interaction model between machines and humans, because you can't, I believe you can't make AI accountable. Like if it makes a mistake, which it will, you're not going to be like, Claude, you did a bad job. I'm so mad at you. Like it's gonna be like, whatever. What's the next prompt?
Yeah, right. Yeah. You used to be able to rough ChatGPT up. You can't really rough Claude up. When I first started working with ChatGPT, I realized that as I got more frustrated with it, it would do a better job. And so I would kind of lean into like, you better not screw this up. You're really going to make me mad, and it put like this whole level of accountability. Claude doesn't care.
Yeah, Claude doesn't care.
Claude doesn't
Like,
care.
at the end of the day, it's a machine. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't care.
Yeah,
Um, there's a lot of people investing in AI, like at an enterprise level or a business level. A lot of people investing in AI, but I think they're challenged with how do I actually make this thing a success?
hmm,
And I still think it comes down to context data.
yep,
Is what are you feeding it so it actually knows who you are?
right. And then I think to your point is how do you make sure that it's accurate, right? So
Yep.
when it gathers insights for you, that you're either human in the loop or you've got some QA QC agents, whatever it is, to make sure. Because I've even connecting to our systems, you ask Claude questions or context,
Yeah.
and it doesn't get it all right. Right? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we've got to kind of that trust but verify methodology.
Well, and I saw this, like I read this BCG as this 10-20-70 rule, but basically they say 70% of why AI fails in organizations is because of people and processes.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I would have said data, but then as I think about it, I'm like, well, that's true because data doesn't just magically appear. It takes people and process to make sure it's in the right state.
Right.
So, I don't think we could come at this is a technology problem. It's still at the end of the day, it's a people process to problem to get the data to enable the technology.
When it goes back, I would just think in general, the Amazon-like experience, the
Yeah.
instantaneous desire for us to have like instant gratification, you still have to put the work in. And I go back to your examples of these large consulting projects. Is when you hire the right partner and you dedicate the time and the resources and the investment to fund, you have a much higher likelihood of success. And it's kind of the same
Yeah.
thing with AI. If I just hop in one day and try and vibe code a quick solution and then start using it as an enterprise solution, I'm probably going to be met with dissatisfaction. But
Yeah.
if you implement something via AI, making sure you have the right people and the processes and the context and the connectivity and maintenance schedule. And so I just think so many humans are just pre-programmed to this like easy button, and it's
Yeah.
just it's just not. It's just not.
Yeah. No. Everyone's looking for an easy button.
They
Like
are, man.
it
I
takes
just
work.
I just want to come in and be like, AI, will you just do my job for me today, and then I'll be back tomorrow morning, and then it just magically happens. So I think that's some security for all of us to know that AI and robots are probably not going to take over the world anytime soon.
There's one feature that I'll be working on this year it's not in place yet, but I mentioned the interview process to identify what processes, following the org hierarchy, what processes people do. Well, I think that could be exchanged with a bot. Whereas you get an email saying, "Hey, Chris would like you to, do this interview," and then a bot comes up and it's preloaded with what we think your processes are, and then you're just interacting with the chat bot saying, "No, I don't really do this. Change the name of this. Combine these two, whatever it is."
Yep.
But that way you could, I mean, if you think about it, it's the interviewer and the interviewee. I can automate the interviewer, but I can't automate the interviewee because I need to get what's in their head.
Yep.
So
Are you
at
an
some point,
AI? Are you an AI avatar? Is that what are you telling me? Are you an
I, I
AI?
I am. I have no emotions. You could yell at me.
That's right. That's right.
I'll be stoic.
Stone cold. You can't rough me up. Oh, that's awesome. Well, Mike, I mean, I tell you, it's been awesome to chat with you today. I just, as maybe a closing thing, I mean, we've talked about a ton, and you've been in the consulting space for years. You've built, technology. You've written books, and I just think about our listeners. CEOs, executives, leaders, peers, people in a variety of industries that listen. My parents, but like, what in your mind, with what you have knowledge on, like, what would be kind of the one thing you would leave folks with, and just say, as you think about, as all of us thinking about leading teams and companies and people and organizations, like what would Michael say that we need to really make sure we're thinking about over the next year or two to increase our chances of success?
Ultimately, I think it's the context data. Is these things are smart and are trained on generally available data, but even with like Claude Cowork, like the reason why it's amazing is because I could point at the files in my hard drive. You got to think through your data, and then back up a few steps if you're going to do that. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean for people? What does that mean for how you validate accuracy? Like, there's a whole bunch of things you need to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not an easy button. It does take some work to enable it, but once that works in place, I think it can do some amazing things.
Yeah, it's awesome. Perfect, man. Well, dude, I really enjoyed catching up. I'm so glad we got to catch up today. And you're right up the road in North Carolina, and so
I'll hit you up next time I'm in Greenville.
Yeah, man. And same thing. If I'm up that way, I'll let you know. But I really appreciate you joining the pod today, man.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Okay, thanks for joining me on Built with Purpose. If you have enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It helps more bold leaders find the show. For resources and show notes, visit our website and connect with me, Chris Fay, on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep building great companies, cultures, and legacies with purpose.